the Leave Me Alone Coalition? Anybody here from the Leave Me the Hell Alone? I see my job a little differently than some people that go to Washington. Some people were sent to Washington to get you stuff. Get me this, get me that. I think my job in going to Washington is to maximize your liberty and minimize the cost. I want government so small that you can barely see it. I want a government that's out of our lives. I don't want it in our personal lives, our business lives. I want a government that minds its own business. But for too long, we've let government get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then some people will say, well, if we were all just nice to each other, if we would all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, it would be all okay. People just fight too much. They say it's too divisive in Washington. And they think back to these halcyon days and they say, there was a time, wasn't there, when everybody got along? Henry Clay's from my state. He was elected to be a member of Congress in about 1810. And he was the youngest Speaker of the House ever. He was elected in his first term in Congress to be Speaker of the House. So he's like 28 years old, he's up there, he's Speaker of the House, but he quickly learns that it's a mob scene. Even on the floor of the House, there are people with guns, knives, canes. In fact, there's one guy who's sitting on the floor of the House with two big hounds. His name was John Randolph of Roanoke. And when you think these big dogs, we're not thinking Labradoodles, okay? We're thinking, anybody seen the Game of Thrones? The Hounds? Anybody remember the Hounds? That's what we're thinking, okay? These were mean dogs. John Randolph once said that when a creditor came to his house looking for money, he said that it was quite, it was just because of the genteel manners of the man that he did not sick his dogs on him. But people didn't like having the dogs. It was a wild, crazy place. People say, oh yeah, it was nice once upon a time. No, the House floor was chaos. So one congressman from North Carolina said, we got to get rid of those damn dogs. And you know what? John Randolph of Roanoke came at him with a cane and beat him senseless with his cane. The Derringer had just been invented. They would have these little sliding guns that would come down their wrist. And this was going on the floor of the House. So when Henry Clay gets elected, Henry Clay says he's going to bring some decorum to Congress. And when he gets elected to the Speaker of the House, he says to the Sergeant of Arms, who was armed in those days, he says, get rid of those damn dogs. We want them off the floor. So they go, they take the dogs off the floor, and John Randolph of Roanoke was livid. And so as he's leaving that day, and he leaves out, and he busts out of the doors, there's John Randolph. Henry Clay's leaving. John Randolph bows up, and he's standing there, and he says to Henry Clay, he says, I never sidestep a skunk. Henry Clay slides past him and said, I always do. The story is told, though, so you get an idea of, you know, there's nothing necessarily wrong with debate. There's nothing wrong with having ideas. People say, well, you should just get along. Your job is just to get things done. You've seen all the chants in all these town halls. Do your job. Well, what is our job? I think it was that I took an oath to the Constitution. I didn't take an oath to say I'm going to get you some free money, particularly when there isn't any money. We borrow $1 million a minute. There is no money in Washington. It's the great deceit and the great dishonesty of Obamacare. They said, oh, we're going to give all these new people government health care, but the federal government's going to pay for it. Well, the federal government has no money. We can't pay for the things we already promised you. So every day in Washington, I have people who come to my office, and they typically have their hands out like this, and so I laugh and tell my wife I had a couple of dozen of the besiegers. It really is sort of like a royal court in the old days. People besiege with a hand out. It's like, you know what I want? I want to see the YAL member saying, give me my liberty. Don't try to take somebody else's money. Give me my liberty back. I think if we had more people like you who believed in ideas, the country would be a better place. I remember when I was about your age, I had just read one of Ayn Rand's novels, and I was discussing it, and it was one of my parents, my friend's parents, and they were like, oh yeah, that's fine for youth. You know, idealism or thinking of ideas is fine for youth, but you'll grow up someday. Well, I'm glad to say I haven't quite grown up. I still think in ideas. I think ideas are important. In fact, I think it's the exceptional or extraordinary person in Washington or anywhere that continues to think ideas are important. For most people, it's the practicality of what can we just get it done, do your job, get it done, get us some money, get us some more of this, without a secondary thought as to where the money is coming from, who you're taking it from, or whether we have it, or whether it was in the Constitution in the first place. We're having a big debate now, and half the Republican Party has suddenly decided they don't really want to repeal Obamacare. They've decided, you know what, maybe it's not so bad. But where in the Constitution does it say we have anything in the federal government to do with health care? And where's the money going to come from? We don't have enough money for the things we already promised. Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, they're all short of money. Medicare's $35 trillion in the hole. Social Security's $7 trillion in the hole. There's not enough money for what we already had in Medicaid, much less doubling it. In my state, we doubled it. We said the federal government was going to pay for it, and gradually the state would pay for it. Next year, Kentucky will have to pay 5% of the cost, meaning the federal government's still going to pay 95% of the cost. Our governor says we don't have enough money to pay for 5% of the cost. So you can see how it's dishonest accounting, and this is the dishonesty of government in general. They're offering you something for nothing. There's an old libertarian statement, there is no such thing as a free lunch. It is true. What we have in Washington is what I call the big-hearted, small brain syndrome. Everybody's got a big heart and they want to help people, and they say, well, don't you want to help people? Don't you want to help people with pre-existing conditions that are already sick? Sure I do. But I have a belief that the best way to help people is through the economic system that has been the greatest deliverer of wealth ever in the history of man. And that's capitalism. What's another word for capitalism? Freedom of exchange. The freedom to voluntarily exchange with your neighbor something your neighbor is willing to give up. They're willing to give up $2 and you're willing to give up a can of soda, whatever you're trading. That is what capitalism is. Everybody's trying to maximize a profit. And one of the extraordinary things of capitalism is when you trade with somebody, when you take $2 and you buy a can of Coke, you want the $2 less than the Coke, and the guy who's selling the Coke wants your $2 more than the Coke. It's really not an equal transaction. It's actually a transaction, because it's voluntary, in the mind of those trading, each one of them actually think they got the benefit of the deal. Because you wouldn't trade if you thought it was equal. If you wanted the Coke equal to the $2, you wouldn't trade. You'd trade because you think you're getting a good deal. But that's voluntary. It's all done voluntary, and that has driven the greatest profit and greatest accumulation of wealth ever. And so when we get to the Obamacare debate and people say, well, yeah, we got to keep it because we won't be able to help the poor people. I'm like, look at what made this country so great that allowed the poor people in our country to be richer than any other country in the world. Now that's not to downplay being poor. It's never great to be poor. Don't be poor if you don't have to. But it is to say that our country is better than any country in the entire world, probably the entire history on this. We had Bernie Sanders get up in a committee the other day and say that childhood poverty is worse in the United States than any place in the world. It's like, really? Have you been to India? Have you been to Africa? Have you been to Central America? Have you been to South America? I'm not saying things are perfect, but in comparison, we're doing pretty well in our country. And we need to appreciate where it came from. We had our presidential candidate, I can't remember his name, said, "Make America Great Again." Well, if we're going to make America great again, we have to understand what made us great in the first place. And a lot of this, you know, the liberty movement, we talk about the Constitution, but it's really not what we're revering necessarily as the Constitution. We're revering something that came first. And that's our God-given liberty, our natural liberty that is innately ours. Now, it's codified and written down, but only part of it's written down. In fact, this was a big debate for the Founding Fathers. They got to writing down some of the main ones, and some said, well, we don't want a Bill of Rights because people will think that's all of our rights. And so they insisted at the end of the Bill of Rights to put down two important amendments. One which gets completely ignored, and that's the 9th Amendment. It says those rights not listed are not to be disparaged. And this is an important thing. This gets to sort of a division among libertarians and conservatives sometimes. Because strict originalists will say, and even Scalia to a certain extent, it's sort of separating Scalia and Thomas, with Thomas being the more libertarian. Strict conservatives, originalists will say, well, there's no right to privacy in the visa bill, and say, oh yes, it looks like you're telling us the truth. They pulled up her visa bill instantaneously. Think of the knowledge I mean, I hardly ever have any cash. I'm terrible because I go on the road for days and don't have any cash. I use my credit card. My whole life's on my credit card. You can tell, you know, do I smoke? No. Do I drink? Sometimes. Never to excess. You know, but you can tell, do I read free market economics? Do I search for free market economics on my computer? Yes. So the thing is that you can tell all that, but it's really nobody's business. It's not the government's business. But all of that is known to government and very, very scary. Why is it scary? Well, it's like Madison said, if government were comprised of angels, we wouldn't need the Constitution. We wouldn't need rules if the government were comprised of angels. There aren't, I met them. There's not many angels in Washington. And so we have to be very wary of what will happen. What's happened with the Flynn conversation should concern us all. I don't care whether you are a fan of the president or not. I don't care if you're a fan of General Flynn or not. But the fact that General Flynn's conversation was listened to and then leaked to the media with the intent of destroying his character, destroying his career, and it did, and he was fired over it from a private conversation. This should worry us all. It should scare us to death that our stuff is being looked at and can be looked at. Your visa information should be yours. But if you had lawyers here and they were going to tell you what is the precedent of the Supreme Court cases, they would probably tell you, and this would probably be accurate, that the Fourth Amendment does not apply to any records that are held by a third party. What does that mean? Everything about you is held by a third party. Your visa records held by the visa company. Your phone records held by the phone company. Banking records are held by the bank. So if you don't have to ask a judge, we don't have to accuse you individually of a crime, and we can just get all of your information anytime, guess what? They will. And that's what they were doing. They were gathering all of this information in Utah in a $1 billion facility, and do you know what their argument was? Well, we're collecting it all, but we have some rules about when we look at it, so we're going to protect your privacy by having some self-imposed rules about when we look at it. And to my mind, if you look back to what the Founding Fathers were complaining about, they were complaining about what were called writs of assistance. The soldiers were writing their own warrants, and they were barging in through the doors to seize your papers to see if you paid your taxes. Well, to my mind, it's the collection of the material. It would be like the British soldiers saying, oh, we're just taking your papers, we're not going to read them. We're just going to look and see if you have your tax stamp on them, but we're not going to read your papers. Would we have been happy if the British told us that? Breaking down our doors and they're not going to read our private information. Collecting my information is an invasion of my privacy. Simply collecting it is. But we have to get to where we have a Supreme Court that's going to side in the favor of privacy. You say, well, how will that ever happen? Will there ever be a chance that the Supreme Court will right these wrongs? Maybe. In 1928, in the Olmstead case that I mentioned before, they said that your phone conversations were held by a third party and that they were not private and the government could listen any time. So from 1928 to 1968, 40 some odd years, they listened to our conversations, or were allowed to without a specific warrant. And then in 1968, they reversed themselves. To my mind, when people say to you, well, it's better to be pragmatic, it's better not to have ideas, you know who the people I look to in history are? The people who weren't. The people who were people outside of their times. So when people say, and they give excuses for Teddy Roosevelt for being a racist, or Woodrow Wilson for saying African Americans couldn't serve in our government, they just say, well, they were just men of their times. Well, they were poor examples of men of their times, and they should not be lauded. We should look for people who lived in those times and were beyond. People who were extraordinary, not men and women of their times, who actually saw beyond and defended ideas because they thought it was right or wrong. I think you could say that of Gandhi. I think you could say that of Martin Luther King. I think you could say that of William Lloyd Garrison, being beaten and drugged through the streets. There are many people, Frederick Douglass, that were people outside of their times, and that were beyond that. I think that's who we should be in the liberty movement. I love the William Wilberforce. He says, having heard what you have heard, you cannot look the other way. You can never pretend as if you had never heard this. This is having heard of the evils of slavery. You can't look the other way. In our time, We've gotten beyond some issues like that, but we still have other issues that are of great importance. Should the government be able to take your property through civil asset forfeiture without a trial, with simply an accusation, then the burden is upon you to sue the government to get your money back. This is happening throughout America, primarily to poor people and disproportionately to minorities, taking their property without, with barely a charge, but definitely without a conviction. I fought in 2011 against new language that was added to our government about indefinite detention. In our fear over terrorism, we decided that an American citizen could be kept and detained indefinitely without a trial. And I had a debate, and I don't like to name names, but the senator from Arizona. And I looked at him and I said, does this mean an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without a trial? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. I said, sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? How does that comport with the idea of being innocent until proven guilty? How does that comport with the idea of having representation? How does that comport with our history of having made grievous mistakes towards groups of people? African Americans, the Japanese during World War II, etc., etc. So I think there still are great battles ahead for your generation. And what I would say to your generation, don't let anybody over 30, 28, tell you what to do, tell you to give up on your ideas, give up on your beliefs. Stay strong, that ideas are strong. And that there, in some ways, ideas are stronger than ours. And that there will come a time in your lifetime when you will be asked to stand up and fight for liberty. And I hope you'll be there. Thank you very much.